From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 3 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
Issue 1, Malaysian jetliner downed.
A Malaysia Airlines Boeing 777 jet crashed in eastern Ukraine in the region of Donetsk, a scant 40 miles from the Ukraine-Russia border. The black smoke rising is believed to be the jet crashing, caught on amateur video. The jet was en route from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur. Because the plane was flying over an area of Ukraine where the Ukrainian military is battling pro-Russian separatists, the crash immediately fueled speculation and finger-pointing that the jet was deliberately downed by an anti-aircraft missile. President Obama addressed the tragedy.
Evidence indicates that the plane was shot down by a surface-to-air missile that was launched from an area that is controlled by Russian-backed separatists inside of Ukraine. Moreover, we know that these separatists have received a steady flow of support from Russia. This includes arms and training. It includes heavy weapons, and it includes anti-aircraft weapons. There has to be a credible international investigation into what happened in order to facilitate that investigation. Russia, pro-Russian separatists, and Ukraine must adhere to an immediate ceasefire. Evidence must not be tampered with. Investigators need to access the crash site, and the solemn task of returning those who were lost on board the plane to their loved ones needs to go forward immediately.
Question, what impact will this downed Malaysian jetliner have on Russia's relations with the U.S. and the EU? Pat Buchanan.
John, first, what this is, John, from what we know, is this is not an atrocity or a war crime deliberately done, but rather a military blunder by the rebels using a surface-to-air missile. We don't know where they got it from. So in that sense, it is not deliberate, but at the same time, it's like the airliner that was shot down by the United States in the Persian Gulf accidentally in 1988. But John, this puts Vladimir Putin in a hellish box. He is the backer of the rebels, and he's going to be under tremendous pressure either to pull back on supporting the rebels and to basically abandon them and to get his people and get his forces out of eastern Ukraine and basically leave these people in the lurch, which is going to be very, very tough to do. And if he doesn't do it, I think he is going to face certain sanctions from the United States. And the real open question is what the Europeans do.
Helena.
Well, whatever reluctance the Europeans have had in following President Obama's lead with putting sanctions on Russia, I think has been substantially reduced, if not erased. Virtually every one of those European nations, and especially the Dutch, they had 150 of their people on that plane. There are many European nationals, a lot of pressure on them to respond. Maybe whoever did this did not intend to get a commercial airliner, but nonetheless, the result of this is this tragic accident, and somebody's going to have to take responsibility for it. And I think President Obama's role here is to make Putin own this. Not let him get away with saying, oh, it was really the Ukrainian government or whatever the dodge he's going to put in. At the same time, the president's got to give him room to back down, because he can stop what's going on in Ukraine. Only he can stop what's going on in Ukraine. So he still has an important role to play.
He's facing an enormous potential strategic setback here, because remember, not too long ago, he effectively controlled the government of Ukraine, and now he's had big assumptions that have gone wrong. He thought there would be a spontaneous uprising in the east. There wasn't, so he had to create one. He thought the new Ukrainian government would founder. Instead, it's turned out to be quite capable militarily, and then he was counting on European opinion being passive, and this event is going to galvanize it. So he doesn't have a lot of cards to play, and it looks like he might have a real losing hand.
Are the Europeans now likely to support stronger sanctions on Russia?
Oh, without question. This is not an accident. This is something that was deliberate. You can't just fire. It's not something as if you dropped a match in the forest and, it caught fire. This was a missile that was deliberately sent up. Nobody has any doubts about it. The president was very clear and very forceful on it, and I thought very effective on it. And I don't think anybody's going to be able to walk away from it, including the Russians. They're going to have to figure out what to do, and if they don't do anything, I think all of Europe is going to be tilting against them in a way that hasn't occurred in a long time. And we are going to be very tough with them.
What is the Russian public being told about this massacre?
Well, there's in no way is the Russian public being told in such a way that they blame their own government for it. That's not the way it works in that country.
What's Putin's line that he's putting out?
He hadn't formed a line. Let me agree with Eleanor here. Let me agree with Eleanor. Look, Putin does not want Luhansk and Donetsk. He doesn't want to own them. He could have sent in the Russian army to get them. But he's been playing a game, keeping this rebellious movement going. And I think now he's in a real spot. And frankly, diplomatically, they're going to have to give him a way to walk down from where he's been. And diplomatically, I think, because he cannot want to continue this thing now. Otherwise, it represents a total breach with the West and the United States. And I don't believe that down deep he wants that. Otherwise, he would have grabbed Eastern Ukraine.
What do we think of this? Russian state-controlled media are reporting that the Ukrainian military accidentally hit the Malaysian jet when they tried to shoot down Putin's presidential aircraft.
It's an outrageous lie. I mean, this guy is a thug and a liar. There hasn't been any doubt about that for a very long time. The Ukrainian military has not been in the business of shooting down planes in that area. The rebels have. They've been shooting down cargo planes, and they've been doing it with Russian-provided military and perhaps with Russian personnel, because a lot of these so-called rebels on the ground are Russian troops or covert agents.
Exit question, multiple choice. What will President Obama do in reaction to this atrocity? Will it be A, push for more sanctions, B, give Ukraine military support like U.S. air power, C, schedule more political fundraisers? He wasn't in town when this occurred.
Right. He will not start now with military support. I think that would be a real mistake because we'd escalate and Putin couldn't back down. I think he's going to wait for Putin's response to this, which is the right thing to do, quite frankly, and to see if somehow they can get Putin to back away from supporting the rebels and end this rebellion and this war.
Yeah, I think that's right. The UN ambassador, Samantha Power, was a lot tougher on Putin than the president. I think the president really is trying to say to Putin, come home, prodigal son, if you will, to give him a chance to make this right. This is a horrendous incident, and the blood is on his hands. So what will the president do? Probably all three of those things. He's not going to stop raising money for the November election.
Yeah, it'll be some A, a lot of C, but it should be B as well. And the Ukrainian government should crush this insurgency and then reach out to the mainstream of opinion in the East, which does not support this Russian-based insurgency.
What's the best case for Russian separatists?
The best case, it seems to me here, from the point of view of, in my judgment, Russia, he's got to back off from what he's been doing to some extent. This just undercuts whatever moral ground, whatever political ground he has, at least in the West. So there's going to be a much tougher response to him. He's got to know that. I agree that we have to give him some limited way to step down, but not too much. We've got to show strength under a situation like this. If we don't, we should just pack up and go.
The best case for the Russian separatists is that they were trying to shoot down a Ukrainian military Antonov plane. You know what they look like?
I personally have never dated one of them, okay? But I don't care. I don't care what they were trying to shoot down, okay? This is what happens when you have this kind of weaponry going up in the air without the technical knowledge as to exactly which plane you're shooting down.
This is an aeronautic digression, but the Antonov plane is the world's monster airplane. You know what it takes to land it? Its landing wheels? 42 landing wheels.
Wow.
An enormous plane.
It's a good argument never to give any rebel movement, the Syrian rebels, surface-to-air missiles of any kind because they wind up shooting down airliners.
Well, that's what happened here. That's what the line is they're going to put out. They hit the jetliner instead.
This was not a surface-to-air, shoulder-held thing. This is a rocket that can knock down planes at 72,000 feet.
They needed training, and where did that training come from?
Right.
Do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, well, it may actually have been operated by Russian covert agents. You know, a lot of these so-called officials in the breakaway republic are former Russian defense officials. So it may have been a Russian rocket operated by operated by Russian personnel.
Certainly Russian observers is probably likely, just to help to make sure that they do it well.
Issue 2, the Kerry-Zarif ongoing nuclear deal.
I am returning to Washington today to consult with President Obama and with leaders in Congress over the coming days about the prospects for a comprehensive agreement, as well as a path forward if we do not achieve one by the 20th of July. There has been tangible progress on key issues. However, there are also very real gaps on other key issues.
With the Sunday, July 20 deadline for a comprehensive nuclear agreement with Iran now at hand, Secretary of State Kerry pressed on with his Iranian shuttle diplomacy. In Vienna, he tried to rescue the stalemated talks between Iran and the P5+1, the United States, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Russia, and China. The P5+1 nuclear negotiations had bogged down over Tehran's insistence on keeping the nuclear status quo without limits on research and development of nuclear centrifuges, a vital component in making weapons-grade nuclear fuel. The U.S. wants limits on the centrifuges, an equally vital component in preventing Iran from achieving what is called a quote-unquote threshold capability. Keeping Iran from being able to quickly cross the nuclear threshold and build a nuclear bomb has been the stated objective of the past 6 months of negotiations.
What we are trying to do is find a way for Iran to have an exclusively peaceful nuclear program while giving the world all the assurances required to know that Iran is not seeking a nuclear weapon. I want to underscore, these goals are not incompatible.
Iran's foreign minister feels the same way. Here's what Mohammad Zarif told Secretary Kerry and the press, quote, "As we stand now, we have made enough headway to be able to tell our political bosses that this is a process worth continuing. This is my recommendation. I'm sure Secretary Kerry will make the same recommendation," unquote. President Obama signals he is also on board.
Question, what's the reaction on Capitol Hill to extending the deadline for the talks? Mitch Lowry.
Well, Capitol Hill's more hawkish on this than the administration is, John, but I do think we'll get an extension probably past the November election. And I think it's in Iran's interest to cut some sort of deal that preserves its essential capabilities. The question is whether the Ayatollah is just too hostile to the United States to cut that sort of deal.
I think the U.S. and Iran have more in common these days. Certainly they're in agreement on Iraq, on Afghanistan, and on Syria. So I think this is certainly worth pursuing. I don't think either side has a full 6 months. They're really pressing on Capitol Hill to put on more sanctions. That comes from Republicans and Democrats too. And Rouhani, I don't know how long his leash is. He's got to start showing some benefits. But these talks are worthwhile and they should be continued.
So you think the Hill is skeptical?
They've been skeptical all along, but
John,
you know, they're not.
John, it's been a
success.
The talks have been a success. Look what they've done. They've got all of the 20% enriched uranium has been diluted and is basically gone and can't be raised to bomb grade.
Well, wait a minute. We know that?
The Iraq nuclear reactor has been which was going to be heavy water, is being modified so it doesn't produce weapons grade plutonium. They're going to limit the number of these centrifuges they got. So you've had progress along this. I agree with Rich. I don't think the Iranians want a nuclear weapon, quite frankly.
No, that's not
and the American,
the
American intelligence agency says they don't have a nuclear weapons program, and they've never reversed that call.
They definitely want it. We wouldn't go to this great trouble for a peaceful nuclear program.
This isn't something that you just sort of pick up and say, what are we going to do this weekend? Let's sort of start off and do some weaponry. And they have not only the fissionable material, they've got the various plants, the nuclear plants that are producing all of this material for
enriched uranium.
And I'll tell you, I don't know what you're reading or what you're, all of the stuff that I'm reading is very, very skeptical whether Iran, in fact, will do a deal and whether this administration will hang tough in terms of making sure that we control the very elements that will produce the capacity for nuclear weapons.
The pessimistic view is that the Ayatollah is calling the shots, and anybody below him, it really doesn't count.